How do you
Right.
know you are in the right career?
Well, I would say that that question is it needs a little unpacking, I would say. So when you think about the career that you're in, a lot of people are in the right career, and yet they find themselves in a situation where they might actually be questioning whether they're in the right career. And what I find in my coaching practice is that more often than not, they are in the right career, but they are in the wrong organizational culture, or they're working under a boss or under a leadership culture that really doesn't match well with their working style or their values. It may not have been that way when they first started working there, but more often than not, but what happens is people start to question if they're in the right career because they reach a point where they're so unhappy, they just start questioning everything. And it's not till they actually exit that work situation and try staying with the career in another work situation that they can really start to discern whether it's the right career or whether it was the environment or circumstances they were in. And yet there may be aspects of the career that they're in that also foster some of the elements of that environment. So it could be multi-layered. But I find that more often than not, people aren't necessarily in the wrong career. They are often either working under a leader or boss that they're not, they're not well suited to work with. And I don't mean that they're not well suited, but that it's just not a good match. Or the work culture they're in is not working for them.
I remember many
So,
years ago, my brother and I
yeah.
were working together in a family business, and the business opened at
Ah,
9 o'clock in the morning, and we were there, and we opened the front door at 8:59 and 59 seconds, and then we finished at 5 o'clock, and the shutter was going down at 4:59 and 59 seconds, and we couldn't wait to get out of that business. We'd
yeah.
been there as a family for 17 years. And that was one of the warning signs for me. The first thing
Yeah.
was, I'm getting there at the very last second to start
Mm-hmm.
as late as I can without getting in trouble, and then
Right.
doing all my duties so I can shut that door when I stop getting paid and get out as fast as I can.
Yep.
And that was the first one. And then probably a decade later on, my parents decided to exit the business, and they said, would you boys like to take over the business? And we looked at what happened to them. We said, hell no.
No.
We're out of here. So we knew we were in the wrong career.
Right.
You've been
Right.
doing this
Right.
for 24 years. You've coached thousands of people. How do people know that they're in the wrong career?
Well, that's a great question. I think that there are situations when I think your example actually was an excellent one, where you find yourself, kind of looking at the clock, waiting till the day is over. There are people who, I think we all go through this at some point or another where Monday morning hits and we don't want to get out of bed and go to work. Or it could also be because when I think of a career, it's different than just going to work, right? Because I think of a career. Let's clarify that first. A career is often something that you're dedicating yourself to over a period of time in which you hopefully want to grow and develop yourself within and move forward in. So I would say you're in the wrong career when you find yourself looking forward in that career and looking at how most people do grow or elevate themselves in that career. And you're thinking to yourself, I don't want that, or I'm not interested in that. And I think that it sounds so simple, but a lot of people reach a point in their careers, in their work lives, where they're making, a certain amount of money, and they have people they're supporting, and they start to feel, that sense of responsibility and obligation. And it's not that simple to walk away, even if they know they're in the wrong career. But then again, if they find somebody like me, maybe they can figure out how to do that and still take care of all the people that they're feeling a responsibility for.
There's a lot of that internal talk. I should be happy.
Yes.
I should be grateful that I've got a job. I should be grateful that I get a monthly or a weekly paycheck. I should be satisfied that there's stability here. It's not a bad company. I could be working with a worse company. Well, my boss is not that bad, but he's not that good either. And I hear a lot of people having these inner conflicts, and they describe it as having an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other.
Yes.
And they still can't figure out if this is the right or wrong career for them. And I think a hot topic at the moment is the future of work. People seem to be talking about the future of work, the future of work, the future of work, the future of work.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And what does the future hold for professionals who are seeking to actually advance themselves?
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a really, you just named a whole bunch of things that I think are really important that people need to really be paying attention to these days, because we don't live in a time, many of us were raised by families or were taught by well-intentioned adults that we should find stability through our work. We should find a stable life. And the goal is to have it be work that is satisfying to some degree. But part of that formula of satisfaction is that stability. And the way the world works now, for the most part, the future of work, is that companies, and I know I'm generalizing, but this is what we're seeing a lot of, companies aren't taking care of their employees the way they used to. They're not providing the kinds of security or sense of longevity for people to stay and grow and develop and dedicate themselves to the work of the company. Change is far more the constant than it ever was. And I'm not saying that in a way that's throwing anybody under the bus or blaming anyone. That just seems to be the way it is. And so I think it's important for people to be thinking about their own futures, their own strengths, but also the things that they feel they really enjoy doing. How do they enjoy most being at work? Do they enjoy engaging with people a lot? Would they rather work with things? And to really find a way to, I could write books about this, but to really find a way to carve a path so they can stay true to themselves as much as possible and always have a sense that they're always going to find a way to provide that kind of pathway to a living, making a living, and a sense of some professional satisfaction along the way without relying on the structures of an organization or company to provide that for them. There is some of that, of course, still there, but I think as we look at the future of work, people really have to steer their own ship to go forward, because we see this all the time, mergers and acquisitions, we see layoffs, we see, reorganizations. It's happening constantly. And so people really have to take a good look in the mirror and figure out who they want to be as professionals, as working people, and get as clear as they can about that for themselves so that they can move forward with that as their foundation, not going to work for this company or that company. I know it sounds so simple the way I say it, but I think there are ways to go about doing that, while making a living. But it takes, it definitely requires getting some support. And I'm not even saying that you have to work with a coach, but I think that it's important to go forward in your career in a way where you aren't just doing everything by yourself, that you make sure if you're married and you have a spouse, that you have those kinds of conversations, or that you have a circle of mentors and other people in your life who you can have great conversations with about what it means to be growing and to be developing and to be moving your life forward, in terms of professional endeavors. And I think a lot of people have just kind of chosen some kind of individual path and they just go. And they don't necessarily, some people do really gather people around them and get that kind of support. And those people generally, find their way. But I think more and more people have to be willing to include others in their process, I guess is what I mean.
You mentioned the word mirror, and it triggered a thought, because when I was 19, I was offered an opportunity in real estate. And my uncle had been successful in real estate, and he said, "Danny boy, why don't you think about a career in real estate?"
Yeah.
And so as part of the onboarding, he gave me a book, and he gave me the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. And he said, "Before you take this career, I want you to read this book." And so it took me a week to read the book. I came back and I reported back. And then his business partner gave me another book, and it was called Maximum Achievement by Brian Tracy. And he said, "Well, if you're still interested, I want you to go and read this book." And when I reported back, he gave me another book, and it was about real estate. And then he said, "Once you've finished reading that, come back." And then they sat me down. They said, "Well, tell us what you think about your career and what you want and where you want to go." And so we went through the process. They offered me a job. And then my uncle, he walked me out the back of the office one day, and he said, "Danny boy, take a look in the mirror." And I said, "What am I looking in the mirror for? I know I'm good looking. I'm 19. Come on." He said, "You are 100% responsible for your career.
Yep.
You are 100% responsible for your paycheck." And he said, "From today forward, I want you to think of yourself as not an employee of this company, but a partner. And your business name is Daniel Tolson Proprietary Limited. And any time that you want a pay rise, walk out the back here and look in the mirror and ask yourself for a pay rise." and I knew that frame was a setup. And it was a setup for the rest of my career, because I knew I was 100% responsible. And what him and his business partner, Greg, did was they removed all of the demotivators out of the environment. And they created a platform where I could succeed. And I could succeed to the level that I wanted. And they always said to me, they said, "Danny boy, you have no obligation here. You are a free man. And for as long as you want to stay and enjoy yourself, you're welcome. And the day that you decide to leave, you owe nothing to us. You're free to go." And I thought, wow, this is interesting. And so along the way, they said, "What's important to you?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm 19. And so my uncle recommended me a goal. He said, "Well, why don't you save up for your first house?" And I said, "Well, that's a long shot." And he said, "Well, I'm going to contribute. And what I'll do is, if you do these next 6 months and you get into the top 10 sales creators and you save X amount of dollars, then I'll help you buy your first investment property." So as both uncle and leader, he said, "I'm going to help you achieve your goal." And I think I'm seeing a big shift. And that was all the way back in 1999. And I was believing back then, there was an old slogan that said, "Don't ask what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for the country." And in business today, it sounds like this: Don't ask what the employee can do for you.
Right.
Ask what you can do for the employee.
Yeah.
And I saw that back in 1999, and I
Yeah.
believed at that stage I was responsible.
Mm.
What are your beliefs on responsibility for career progression? Who is responsible? Is it one person, or is it a collective effort across the team?
Well, I think each person is responsible for their own career, their own growth. But if you're talking about a team, in a team within a workplace, and they're charged with, accomplishing certain goals or outcomes, then I think the team is collectively responsible. So I think that's a different, it's a different way of looking at it, but that's, I think there's a difficulty in holding everybody responsible in a certain way. It's like, it reminds me of when I was in graduate school getting my MBA, and we had to do these group projects, and some people did most of the work and a few people did very little of the work, and yet we all got the grade. And it was pretty frustrating because I thought, well, this is not right. This isn't what real life is like. This is just a school exercise. But no, that really is how real life is. So I think ultimately we are each responsible for ourselves, but I think that part of that responsibility includes sometimes you have to carry more of the load, and sometimes you have to be open to letting somebody else in and letting them carry parts of the load too. And I think part of that includes not assuming, what happens when you assume, not assuming that other people are not capable of doing their part. I think that ends up being a big mistake too. That's how we end up having micromanagers in some of our organizations, right? Because they think they have to do it all, and they don't let people grow, or they don't let people make mistakes and fail or learn from mistakes. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword in some ways. Each individual is responsible both for what they contribute, but they're also responsible for leaving enough space open to let other people shine and let other people show up and make their contributions.
Situational leadership. The person with the most skill or knowledge in that area should lead at that time. Mm-hmm. And then when somebody else demonstrates more skill or more knowledge or a different attitude, then they should lead. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to make these contributions. Here in Taiwan, we go to the doctor when we're healthy.
Oh.
In Australia and the
wow.
Western world, people go to the doctor when they're sick.
Yeah.
In your opinion, when should professionals start speaking with a career coach? Should it be when they figure out they're in the wrong career? Or should they do it earlier, even when they know they're in the right career?
Well, what actually happens and what I think they ought to do are two different things. So what I think people ought to do is when they are in a career, and they could be relatively happy or content, but they know that there's going to come a time, maybe it's a few years down the road, but they know that the time will come when they will be ready for a change, and they want to be ready for that change, or they want to take the time they need to consider their options. Now, I do get clients who do that, and I love working with those folks because they're not feeling the urgency of or the pain of being miserable. And so they're making decisions and exploring the territory from a purely curious place. It's a great way to use a career coach. But there's always a bit of a balance, because they're also still in the middle of perhaps growing from the position that they're currently in. So if you're on a growth trajectory and you're in the middle of something at work, and let's say you even have, a great boss or a mentor at work or other mentors outside of work, you may not need a career coach right then and there. There are people who do work with career coaches even while they're in the middle of a job because they need that outside input or that sounding board so that they can navigate their career from that vantage point so that they can get to the next place that they want to be. Likewise, sometimes the employers will hire career coaches or leadership coaches to help their people grow. So it's not just hiring a coach when you're ready to make a change. Or let's say a dramatic change, like a job change or a complete pivot in your career. So, come to think of it, there's always a good time to work with a career coach. But I would say that the more difficult time is when you're already feeling that real deep sense of urgency, like you're in a work situation that's really toxic or really doing a lot of damage, and you have to get out of there, and yet you'd like to go through a thoughtful process about what you're going to do next. So that can be tricky, but there are ways to work with that. It just may be that you need more of an interim plan before you then go forward into a more optimal plan of what you're going to do. But there's a lot of different ways to work with a career coach, whether it's to grow yourself as a leader. Some people would call that leadership coaching or executive coaching, but it's all about your career. It's all about growing and becoming more of who you want to be at work.